guest. Todd Shepard is a historian and author. He joins us from Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. Thank you, sir, very much for being with us. The situation then, Abdelaziz Bouteflika has resigned. Give us your reaction, sir.
I mean, great news. Very unexpected in the perspective of before the 22nd of February, kind of necessary given recent events and inevitable in the last few days, giving General Said Ghala's decision or kind of affirmation. Said Ghala is a very close ally of Bouteflika historically within the armed forces. So his kind of move over the last week as the head of the army to call for Bouteflika to resign rendered that inevitable. And again, today the army came out strongly, clearly signaling, as your previous guest, I thought, really astutely noted, that the army was weighing in on internal conflicts within the regime. But a great day. This has been a kind of demonstration of an effort to exercise popular sovereignty. To sum it up, these images of the Algerian Revolution, which won victory in '62 against France, under the kind of motto of only one hero, the people. This affirmation of a democratic republic that people have always been dubious about, but using this language of popular sovereignty, of the people being in the repository of the nation really effectively. So bravo, the Algerians.
Are you surprised that Salah, the Lieutenant General who made the announcement earlier, had to do so in such a public way, given the proximity he has to the president and his entourage?
Again, as your previous guest said, I think the last year and a half or so have seen a series of moves where parts of the so-called the power, le pouvoir, or the system have been speaking out publicly. Like, for instance, one time the kind of resignation of what prime minister was announced on a private television channel, which would never happen if there was an agreement behind the scenes of where to move. So it put pressure, and the rest of the people the rest of the kind of stakeholders had to move to affirm, okay, this person is going to step down, ending the debate. So once these things get out in public, it's a way to put pressure on other stakeholders in the so-called power to force them to move. And so that's what I presume Gaid Salah was doing.
Todd, can I ask you, what do you think will happen next? Because clearly the people on the street wanted the change. They've got the change that they wished for. Will they get what they're wishing for next, do you think?
I hope so. What that is unclear. What I think a lot of recent discussion, recent, i.e. in the last 2 or 3 weeks, is looking beyond what had come to seem inevitable, that Bouteflika would step down, looking towards a shift, a dramatic change in the Constitution. This Constitution is quite new, but Bouteflika himself or whoever spoke for him had announced that there would be a serious revision, that there would be a kind of nationwide consultation. The question, I think, is, will that happen in his absence? And will that happen in a way that seems fair to people, the people that were being summoned or being announced as participants in that discussion? I think met with much skepticism. So will something happen that allows for popular participation? So there's been a lot of attention to the law, to the Constitution, linked to the idea that this is a democracy. In formal terms, that's possible to see. It clearly has not been. So hopefully that will move forward. I think the armed forces, I think people are a little more skeptical of the armed forces than your last 2 guests have put forward. I do think that there's a lot of warm feelings of what the army has done historically, but there was a real sharp division between the presidency and the armed forces. Gaid Salah played a role in making sure that the presidency under Bouteflika took back a lot of power that the army had accumulated in the 1990s during the dark decade, during the devastating civil war that Islamists kind of forced into being in the early 90s. And so that the presidency has done something. There's a reason Bouteflika was still there. Again, I think there's going to be suspicion about the military stepping in. People were happy that the military was pushed out of the central role that it had in the 90s, in the early 2000s. But like your other guests have said, I think we have to wait to see. This is very unexpected, all that's happened. Everyone hoped for something. It needed to change. So far, it's been an amazing demonstration of unity, but in particular unity in the name of democracy, in the right of the people to have the final say, and in a claim of peacefulness. Pacifism have been key mottos during all of the demonstrations. So I hope it keeps moving forward that way. It seems like it will. And I think that people have a lot of expectations for something important to shift. This is not going to be enough, although it's great news. Bouteflika stepping down.
Lieutenant General Ahmed Gaid Salah, in some ways, to some people, looks like a president in waiting. Do you fear that might happen? That the military might somehow slide itself into power?
Again, I think if that was the fact that they had to step out and say something publicly and distance himself from the regime, the powers, the pouvoir in general, suggests that there's real tensions there. So they were effective. He was effective as the voice of the armed forces. Today, the army stepped in officially, calling for the president to step down. But that suggests that there's a lot of maneuvers. That is, there's not a consensus within the pouvoir for them to step in. This is why these delays keep happening. I mean, Bouteflika should not have run. He did, as your previous guest noted, because they didn't have a clear way out that would satisfy them. So it seems unlikely that they would let, that is, the other stakeholders would simply let Gaid Salah step in. And I don't think that the people, that is, in people at least on the streets, would accept that either. At this point, there has not been the success that was clearly counted on early on in the demonstrations in sparking unrest, violence, riots. None of that has happened, and there clearly were efforts to push people towards that. So it doesn't seem to give an excuse for the army simply to step in. And again, there's not a history of that. The moment of the 90s, there was. It was violent. Darkness was on Algeria, and violence was there. That's not the situation now. So I don't see how that could be possible. I hope it's not possible. But again, anything is possible right now. I mean, that's true, but nothing seems to meet us to prepare the way for that. The Algerians have had a lot of experience politically. And so I think that there's a lot of awareness of that on the part of those people in power. They certainly are not very clever, or at least they are very clumsy. That's what we've seen in the last several weeks since the 22nd of February, the complete incapacity of those in power to manage what was going on, to respond in a timely way. If this had happened, Bouteflika stepping down had happened 5 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, things would be radically different. Right now, you have a very mobilized discussion, one that is really constantly recycling and foregrounding themes of popular democracy, of the popular sovereignty of the people being the ultimate repository of democratic legitimacy, and of Algeria not being a monarchy, not like Morocco, not being a state with an authoritarian anchor, at least, a state that claims to be a democracy and to represent the will of the people. So I don't see how something that doesn't directly speak to that could fully work.
Todd Shepard of Johns Hopkins University, thank you so very much for sharing your analysis with us here on France 24. We appreciate your time, sir.